And welcome back, folks. This is the Law and Crime Network. Welcome to the afternoon session. I'm Michael Bryant. Have some guests here. We're going to chew on a few different items. We're going to start with a case out of Tennessee. Eric Boyd. This was the case involving the brutal torture, rape, and ultimate murders of Shannon Christian and Christopher Newsom. Eric Boyd was one of five defendants, four of them already tried and sentenced to everything from death to life without parole. One of the women involved got 35 years, I believe it was. But there were 36 counts against Eric Boyd. And by all accounts, the prosecution was kind of having a little trouble tying him to the actual crimes. And he's already serving time under federal charges where he was convicted as really an accessory after the fact for hiding the main bad guy. So what did the jury do with this whole thing? Well, here's the verdict. So the jury had a lot to chew on here. 36 counts against Eric Boyd, ultimately found guilty of really the top charges, and kind of a verdict that sticks in my craw a little bit. Chad Young's still here. We're playing musical attorneys, though. He's moved down there. And filling in between us, Gwendolyn Lindsay Jackson. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me ask you right out of the box here, what do you think about this verdict based on what I think was a challenging case for the prosecution?
Well, I think that the jury really believed the star witness. And who was the star witness? It was somebody that was already convicted. Normally, you don't really put a lot into what someone who's trying to get a reduced sentence has to say, but this gentleman, and I'm just using that term very lightly, very lightly,
very nice,
he was just very believable.
You think so?
I think he was. And he put this defendant right smack in the middle of the slaying of Christopher.
Yeah,
he placed him right there.
He contradicted so many things that he had said himself earlier on.
He did,
so
but
I thought that was odd.
I thought it was odd, but he was kind of plain talking. I'm not going to say he's the sharpest tool in the shed, but he was plain talking. He was very open. And I think this kind of put the nail in the coffin for the defendant.
Chad, how much of this do you think might have been guilt by association? This was one of the five involved to some degree.
I think it was probably a huge factor. I mean, I could see the jury kind of analyzing this case and saying, I don't care what your role was. This crime in this case was so horrendous, I'm going to give you the most maximum punishment I possibly can.
Yeah, and I think they had plenty to work on if it was pure emotion, that's for sure. We have now a couple of the snips from the prosecution closing and the defense closing to give you a sense of their perspectives as they laid it out for the jury. So there is defense attorney Clinton Frazier really highlighting some of the things we've talked about here, which was the whole concept of guilt by association. But he also mentioned the key piece of evidence that really tied Eric Boyd to all of the activities taking place during the abduction and the problems that led to the murder of Ms. Christian and Mr. Newsom. That was the car. So key witness on that issue of the car, Xavier Jenkins. Let's listen to his testimony. That's Xavier Jenkins, critical witness in this case against Eric Boyd. But what you just saw, in my opinion, is about 90% speculation, 10% factual. Gwen, how come I don't blame him? He's just trying to tell a story. Why is the defense not objecting like crazy to his speculation?
I was very surprised at that because he was just guessing a lot. He said, I guess. And then he says, well, you know, he could tell they were all four men. He could tell they were black men. He didn't really identify anyone, didn't know who they were. But, I mean,
he said they slowed down to look at me. You don't know why they slowed down.
You have no idea. But I mean, he's very speculative, so I was very surprised that he didn't.
Yeah, and toward the end, the defense, came out of their coma and did object. But by then, there was so much already out there.
Yeah,
Chad,
a lot of damage.
This guy was critical, though, because he put a vehicle really in the hands of the defendant.
Right. It's hard to sit here at this table and not want to jump through the television screen and yell objection when I
still do that.
When
it doesn't really help, but I do that. Yes.
Yeah. Quotes that he said in his long answer, things that he assumed they were trying to do. He was slumped down. I guess he was trying to hide. He could have easily done a U-turn. Complete speculation. I would have never allowed this answer.
So do you think, Gwen, that this witness gave the jury at least something to hang their hat on? They aren't worried about what should have been objected to. They're just taking in what they hear.
I think this crime was so horrific, they were looking to hang their hat on something, and something other than the other star defendant who was supposed to who testified that actually put Eric Boyd at the scene of the crime, who, by the way, is going to get a reduction in sentence. So, I mean, it's kind of like you have to have somebody that's not 100% affiliated, because taking that star witness's word You have to take it, but it's like doing a deal with the devil because, you know, it's really horrible. He witnessed a lot of this stuff. He was participating. And the only thing he's doing is really giving the family, the victim's family, a little bit more peace of mind that, hey, we're not going to let this last bad guy get away.
Yeah, and we're going to hear from George Thomas here in just a couple of moments here. Chad, before we do that, with this witness, and Gwen makes a good point, he's really not affiliated with anybody. You know, this guy we just heard from, Xavier, he's just there to tell a story, more important for the jury than to hear this kind of witness.
Yeah, because he gives credibility to the witness that you already heard, the other defense witness, right? Because the defense witness has so much motive to potentially lie. When you get another witness with no motive to lie, you tend to believe them. Juries tend to believe those witnesses that are not involved with the case.
Yeah, so let's listen now to somebody who had a lot at stake here. You either got 2 life sentences or, we're going to skip that, we're going to go to closings? Okay, let's do that. Let's go to the closings now, talking about this particular witness, George Thomas. So, George Thomas getting a lot of play in the closing arguments. Well, why is that? Well, let's listen to his testimony and you'll see what he had to say, and then we'll chat about it on the other side. So there he is. There's George Thomas, the jury, checking this guy out. You know, Chad Young, jurors are no different than regular folks meeting somebody in any setting. They're sizing you up immediately, right? So the first thing they see, this guy in his stripes there, so they know something ain't so good with this guy. Tell me about, you know, initial impressions, and then we can get into, you know, the details of what he had to say.
You know, it cannot get past the juror's first impression that he is a co-defendant in this matter. He has a motive to get up there and potentially lie about Mr. Boyd. That has to be front and center of their mind the entire time they are listening to every word out of his mouth.
So, Gwen, they do get to hear him.
Yes.
And obviously, at least based on what we got from this verdict, they believed him to some degree. But there were so many contradictions, and the first thing people want to know is, well, what's the guy sitting there for? What's in it for him? And we know what's in it for him. It was a massive reduction in his sentence. How do you overcome that if this guy's your star witness?
I think you just let him talk. And I think they prepped him in the sense of knowing exactly what he was going to say and how he was going to project himself. He did come across like he was telling the truth. He did also come across as a slime ball, because that's what he is. He was, you know, obviously a terrible, terrible person. He witnessed a lot of the terrible things that happened, the rapes, and I think he admitted he saw the victims blindfolded. So he's a terrible person. But he has an epiphany, and he's telling the truth, and he is making sure, again, that Mr. Boyd isn't going to get away with murder. Because if Mr. Boyd isn't put away, he's going to be out soon. I mean, he got, I think, an 18-year sentence. He's been behind bars, what, 10, 12 years, something like that? He would be out soon. So this gentleman is not a hero. And again, I say gentleman because I'm being polite. He's not a gentleman. He's a slime ball. But he is adding value to making sure that the victims' families actually get justice. Yeah. He's doing something to make sure that happens.
And the jury embraced that for whatever reason they needed.
Whatever reason.
I could never get past the fact that he was in this 800-square-foot house and could never hear all of the happenings going on to Shannon Christian, the torture, the rape. Anyway, guilty on the counts charged against Eric Boyd. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, what's going on with Jeffrey Epstein? Always something. We're going to find out what's the latest in that case when we come right back. This is the Law and Crime Network.